We want to discuss today one topic that is very relevant for people who are starting to kind of get into rank, but also for people who have been playing rank for a while but still haven't got a solid methodology towards banning. Especially with changes that... When were the changes made with the double bans? When was that?
It's been a few months, but there was a change. Before the change happened, there were only single bans from, I believe it was tier 5 up. You would get a single ban, but now it became that once you hit, I believe it was tier 6 or tier 7, you start getting double bans as a hunter. So you'll be able to ban 2 survivors, and then survivors will be able to ban 2 hunters. So there's been that kind of subtle change, and they also decreased the rank that you needed in order to get single bans.
Banning is a bit of a difficult topic because it of course depends usually on every hunter's weakness. But there are some common trends, I would say, that you will see, and maybe some tips that you can take home with you to be able to analyze which survivors you might, or which hunters or survivors you might want to ban.
So I think there are a few factors that take into play here. First of all, it's going to be like, what's your kind of desired result? Are you looking just to build up your rank slowly via a bunch of ties? Or are you looking to try to get wins to really surge up the ranks quickly? Another thing to think about would be what sort of communication you're going to be able to have. Are you going to be playing in a 4-person team comp, or are you a solo queue player? These are all things that kind of factor into whether you're going to be banning specific like chase hunters, or whether you're going to be banning kind of more complicated characters like your Dream Witch or Breaking Wheel. At least I personally feel like if you're looking for just ties, you might start looking into banning characters such as like your Dream Witch, your Sculptor, your Breaking Wheel, kind of really complicated hunters that are kind of like that high risk, high reward type of character. Those would be the characters I would probably lean on towards trying to ban. At least in like the highest tiers that I'm in, a lot of times these are like duos playing. Almost every single match, I'm getting like Bloody Queen and Geisha bans. So while those are generally considered like tie hunters, there's such a firm tie against the top hunters of this server. There's like nearly no win potential there. So if you're looking to kind of rise up the leaderboards really early, you might think about banning like your Bloody Queen or your Geisha, because those are probably the 2 most common characters played now, at least on this server.
What are some other things you should think about when banning or considering what to ban?
I think you should think about the kind of maps that you're picking. So there are certain maps that are more favorable for certain hunters. So for instance, if you're going on a map, for instance, like Arms Factory or Eversleeping, you might think more strongly about like banning Dream Witch, because Dream Witch is a very strong hunter for those maps. Now, for instance, if you're like playing on those maps, you might think about like banning Dream Witch, but Poland on Arms Factory is not a very favorable pick for Poland, so he's going to have a very tough time there. So you just have to really know what types of hunters are good on specific maps, and you'll get that over the course of time and lots of experience. But I think overall, if you're looking at kind of specific maps and knowing exactly what maps are favorable for certain hunters, you'll have a better idea of what you're supposed to be banning there. With a few exceptions, for instance, being like Geisha and Bloody Queen, which are not super map dependent. If you're kind of looking for those wins, you might consider, at least in your rank matches, banning them like near every time, because they are not super map dependent hunters. But there are a few hunters, the ones that I can think of right off the bat are Dream Witch, Poland, of course like Mad Eyes, Photo.
It's actually very popular. It may not be very popular in tournaments, but it's very popular in the game. People like to rank up with him. So yeah, that's a good example. For Dream Witch, for example, yeah, when Dream Witch is bad on a map, it might be just a wasted ban for you to ban her there, because they weren't going to play her anyway. So you might want to reconsider as to which of the strongest hunters, or of the group of hunters that you were planning on banning, which ones were better or are usually better on that map.
So some of Dream Witch's strongest maps specifically would be Arms Factory, Eversleeping, Lakeside's a pretty common map. Every once in a while you see like a Moonlit Dream Witch. It's all about maps that have specific cipher setups that allow you to possibly get a last grouping of 3 ciphers that are really close to each other. So I think it comes, for Dream Witch, it's a lot about like cipher placement than it is necessarily about like kind of map specifically, with the few exceptions that she's not great on a whole lot of 2 stories necessarily.
Yeah, so you need to analyze the different kind of structures, as you said, that the maps have, and if there are characters like that really do suffer with 2 stories, then then why are you banning them? Because there are going to be a lot of kites that are going to end up being in 2-story buildings, so it's probably better for your team that you play against that character. I think another thing to take into consideration is your team composition. There are going to be inherently groups of survivors that are going to be stronger against specific types of hunters, and you might not want to ban certain hunters because of that. What would you say some kind of good rule, or what's a kind of a good rule of thumb for that?
I think we should talk just a brief conversation about team composition. Usually in a team there is 1 rescuer, 1 harasser, 1 assist, and 1 decoder. This kind of tends to be the general team layout that I come against in rank. There have been some exceptions with the introduction of characters like psychologist, patient, some very strong kiters that sometimes take the roles of the assist or the decoder characters, but this is generally the rank comp that you're going to be going for. You're going to have to take each kind of selection individually based on what you have. If you're going like really decoder heavy, a lot of times you might necessarily not worry too much about characters like Poland or other characters that rely a lot on like late game pressure. Whereas if you're going for like a really rescuer heavy comp, like very durable survivor team comp, you might not necessarily be as afraid of like those chase hunters because it's going to take them significantly longer to get that first chase.
You want to weigh out, how fast you expect to finish all of the cipher machines and which characters could mess around, which hunters could mess around with your team composition because of that. If they're like fast chasing characters where they can down survivors really quickly, then yeah, if you have lots of like mechanic style characters that can't really kite, then you are going to suffer.
Yeah, and it also depends on how much that affects the decode speed. So for instance, something that used to be really popular back in I think it was around season 14 through 16, this was really popular, was the triple rescue 1 decoder team comp. That's a style that used to be really popular. It's been kind of phased out for this sort of kiter rescuer decode kind of meta, but the triple rescue used to be really strong, but it would be very tough for this team comp to go against hunters that would carry quenching teleport. A lot of it is currently RNG based about what spawns you get, but there are a few things you control, and one of those would be kind of the team selection that you have.
I think another good exercise for us to kind of work on is to have a look at what's being banned and discuss why those characters are being banned. As you said, BQ and Geisha are obviously getting banned quite often. They are just, as you said before, they are very consistent on most maps, so they can be played quite easily. And also I think they are less complicated to learn, so more people can pick them up. So you'll just see them more often as well. But there are also characters like Sculptor and Breaking Wheel. I'm not sure if Sculptor's being banned as much anymore because of her recent nerf, but she does occasionally get banned. But why would you say Sculptor's getting banned?
I think Sculptor gets banned kind of for the same reasons that Dreamwitch and Poland sometimes get banned. Is kind of that, at least she used to be really consistent, and the reason why she was getting banned before was because she both had very good win potential and was extremely consistent, but now she's not necessarily quite as consistent as she used to be. She does still have that win potential the same way that Dreamwitch or Poland does. And I think the reason why you might choose to ban Sculptor over one of these 2 other hunters is that she is inherently a lot less difficult to learn and comprehend than these other 2 hunters.
Yeah, there is more risk to those characters as well. A Breaking Wheel can just get kited in the early game that can make him kind of a little bit risky to take along with you. But yeah, Sculptor just has a more linear chase style than the other 2. And she does very quick downs when she does well.
Another reason why Dreamwitch is being used less in ranked than at least she used to be is because Dreamwitch matches take a long amount of time. You can have Dreamwitch matches that last, 15 minutes. Even in extreme cases, I think I've had matches that have even pushed that at the last cipher. So in a ranked session where you only have 2 hours available for you to try to get as many ranked matches and as many points as you can, having a character that lasts 15 or 20 minutes a match is not exactly feasible for really quick grinding up on that leaderboard.
Have you been hunter ranking and you're not quite sure which survivor to ban? Then you need to watch the second half of this video over on Music Man's channel, and you'll learn everything you need to know about banning survivors.